Here we are for the semifinals of Grand Prix Quebec City. The players have anxiously been waiting, and here we are between Jake Mondello and Omar Beldon. We had just watched the Dark Jeskai mirror from Omar, who took it down. Jake happened to take down the Abzan deck, and so we got a pretty sweet match here, guys. I know you want to see some Ulamogs, some Atarkas, some Ugins. Let's see if Jake can find his way to those large creatures over Omar's Mantis Riders.
Yeah, Jake's deck is great. It is the way you should build a Ram deck in Standard right now. Curiously, he doesn't have Rattleclaw Mystic or Shaman of the Forgotten Ways or any of the creature ramp cards. He's just relying on, well, as you see here, Sylvan Scrying into Shrine of the Forgotten Gods and trying to ramp with cards like Map the Wastes, Limited All-Star, Explosive Vegetation, Hedron Archive into, well, possibly a turn 5 Ugin that I can cast turn 5 Ugin quite reliably. Or, well, 3 copies of Ulamog, Deceased as Hunger. A hungry Ulamog may just take down this GP. And Jake was quite happy with this matchup. He told me that, well, unless the Jeskai deck has a really good draw with 1 or 2 Mantis Riders, plus a piece of interaction, and his own draw is not really all that good, only then he is afraid of this matchup. But in general, he said that Ulamog is just a great card for this Jeskai deck, which typically is not super fast and doesn't have that big of a defense against Ulamog, also exiling its lands. One thing about these fetch land mana bases with Jeskai is that, yeah, you have lots of, for instance, black sources, but only like 1 or 2 black jewel lands in the deck. So if Ulamog exiles, for instance, this Sunken Hollow, it's possible that Omar is just locked out of playing black cards for the remainder of the game.
Yeah, if we look at the number of lands each player has on the battlefield, well, Jake just cast an Atarka, I believe, on turn 4.
Yes, indeed. Explosive Vegetation ramping into turn 5 it has to be.
Turn 5.
Because Sylvan Scrying doesn't actually ramp you, it just searches for a land.
Right.
So turn 4 veggies, and then turn 5 the Dragonlord Atarka. Now Omar had a kind of slow draw.
Maybe that's what it was. He missed a land on his turn then.
But facing down the turn 5 Dragonlord Atarka, that is a tough position to be in.
You see the All-Star Jotty offshoot in Jake's hand. It's not necessarily for this matchup where the small ground creatures don't come out too quickly, but hey, Dragonlord Atarka happens to be an 8/8 flying trampler.
Yeah, we've been calling Jotty Offshoot the green time walk, because for this deck that is essentially what it is. It just buys you time until you can cast your big haymakers. And you're right that it is not really for this matchup. It's mainly there against, say, Atarka red decks. But Jake told me that he is actually planning to keep them in, even after sideboard.
Okay.
Which is a bit surprising, because they don't really block all that much. Maybe a Soulfire Grandmaster, but that's pretty much it.
Sure.
But importantly, they just gain you some life whenever you play a land. And when you put a lot of lands in play with Explosive Vegetation and just natural land drops, that can give you the time to well, get towards your Dragonlord Atarkas, the Ugins, the Ulamogs.
Second Jotty offshoot here. Omar can only play a Tasigur who, well, doesn't really do anything against Dragonlord Atarka.
I mean, how can you lose when you have 2 Jotty offshoots?
I don't think you can, Frank. I don't think you can. One of the lands that's really important to Jake's deck, and in fact, I believe it was the land that he Sylvan Scryed for, was the Sanctum of Ugin. If he finds another colorless spell, it doesn't even have to be a creature. If he finds another colorless spell, so like Ugin or Ulamog, he's going to be able to sacrifice that Ugin and chain into some more. So, pretty crazy. Of course, looks like Atarka wins the game in three hits.
Yeah, if the Dark Jeskai deck doesn't have a Crackling Doom for it, I mean, indeed, it just attacks 3 times and that's it.
Yeah, I don't think Omar has any good sideboard for the Dragonlord Atarka, rather.
He probably was not ready for this particular matchup.
I guess Disdainful Strokes from the sideboard could do some work.
Yeah, they can counter Ugin and Dragonlord Atarka efficiently. They can also counter Ulamog, but the exile to permanence trigger would still happen. Still, it's better than like facing an Ulamog as well at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of bad cards in Omar's deck that he probably wants to remove, like Wild Slash, Fiery Impulse. They don't kill anything of relevance. Culligan's command maybe also not set up all that well for this matchup. But yeah, what can he board in? Sure, 2 copies of Disdainful Stroke, 1 Duress that might snag like an Explosive Vegetation,
Sure.
stunt the development a bit perhaps. And then what? Are we gonna see Felidar Cubs being boarded in just for the Grizzly Bear?
So
Yeah.
going over to our secondary match, Oliver Polak-Rothman versus Dan Lanthier. This is the classic mirror match of Dark Jeskai.
And this matchup can be a very grindy one. Just the players trading off their resources, 1 for 1, trying to eke out some small advantages. For instance, if you can destroy or deal 2 damage to an opposing Jace with Culligan's command while returning your own,
Yeah.
that's huge in this matchup. We also see a Dragon Master outcast in Dan Lancier's hand. That is typically a one-off, but a very important card in this matchup because it just keeps coming back due to all the commands. And whenever you catch your opponent without an answer for it, even for 1 turn, it'll start making some dragons.
Yeah, and as we can see, both of these players have a bunch of lands on the battlefield. This has been a lot of draw-go. They don't want to make the first move. You kind of want to cast your spells at the end of the opponent's turn so that, you know, if they counter or they do something in response, you're able to untap with a grip full on your turn.
It's also quite a skill-intensive matchup because of all the sequencing decisions
Yep.
and which removal spell you want to play on which kind of threat.
So it looks like Oliver Polak-Rothman's going to Ojutai's command to counter the Dragon Master and draw a card. Dan can do nothing but pass after playing a Mystic Monastery.
And Polak-Rothman was one of the players from Team Eureka,
Okay.
or Eureka from Europe, who stayed for another week after Pro Tour Milwaukee. He was also here with Joel Larsen and Morten Dang, a very well-respected player from Austria, from Europe. He's won a Grand Prix before, GP Utrecht last year. And now he's also trying to make a go for it
Yeah.
here in Quebec.
Great draw for Oliver on that turn. A Dispel, one of the best cards in this matchup. Looks like a Kolaghan's command is going to be used at the end of Oliver's turn by Dan.
Trying to get that Dragon Master outcast back and forcing Oliver to discard a card. It's another 2 for 1, although the discard of the Flooded Strand is kind of irrelevant, so not the most impressive 2 for 1.
So Oliver has a 1 of Dragonlord Silumgar in his deck, and I actually see that in his hand right now, which could be huge if he's able to play that and protect it.
And take the Dragon
Sure.
Master outcast.
That doesn't seem very flavorful, but stealing a Tassiger maybe, but
Yeah.
we'll have to see what Oliver's follow-up to Dan's Dragon Master Outcast is. And I really like the Dragonlord Silumgar in these decks, as well as maybe Exert Influence coming out from the sideboard.
Yeah, it has been a new addition to these decks. I think most of the lists at the Pro Tour, or rather the list from Owen Turtenwald and
Sure.
John Finkel, ran Sarkhan, the Planeswalker, in that slot. But, well, Oliver decided to switch things up a bit,
Yeah.
go for Dragonlord Silumgar.
And in a meta filled with, you know, Gideon and Ugin, who's just so good. So Kolaghan's command being aimed at the Dragon Master Outcast, and I think at Dan Lanthier's hand.
Yeah, meta Dispel. Yeah, Oliver could fight back by dispelling the Dispel.
That's what he's thinking about.
But if he also has Dragonlord Silumgar, he may just want to keep the Dispel to
Sure.
protect his Dragonlord. That may even be more important.
And remember, this is all at the end of Dan's turn. So Oliver going to be able to untap, draw an extra card, and view his options after that. Here you get an overlook of the players. We're currently on game 1. So he did dispel back, it looks like. All right, and actually, I think he returned a creature from his hand instead of making Dan discard. Is it a Mantis Rider?
Looks like it. Yeah, when you're not sure what your opponent can have in hand, it's
Sure.
typically better to get back a Mantis Rider for sure than to force your opponent to discard what will often be a land.
Now, Oliver opted not to play the Mantis Rider on his turn. I think he drew a Dig Through Time, which is huge in this matchup. He doesn't have a way to protect it. Crackling Doom, Dragonlord Silumgar, and that Mantis Rider. Dan just playing a land here and passing Oliver, digging through the end of his turn.
Possibly one key reason why Oliver did not cast his Mantis Rider was because he was expecting Dan to be holding an Ojitai's command, which indeed Dan had. And then Dan could have countered the Mantis Rider and brought back the Dragon Master outcast. That could have been a devastating sequence.
Yeah, looks like this game's going to carry on for quite some time. We're actually going to go back to our main feature match, but don't think we won't come back to this if the opportunity arises.
Yeah, I think your assessment of this game will carry on for a while is accurate there. This matchup is quite grindy, but the matchup between the Eldrazi deck and the Dark Jeskai deck, as we saw, that can be over pretty quickly.
Yes. Of course, if you're just tuning in, folks, this is Grand Prix Quebec City. We are in the semifinals. We're watching Jake Mondello versus Omar Beldon.
And we're just speculating what Omar might be bringing in, and he may not have enough reasonable cards in his sideboards to even add here. As for Jake, I briefly talked to him in between the quarters and the semis. He said that he would be bringing in 3 copies of Rending Volley, which is a good way to protect yourself from the fast Mantis Rider draws, as well as the 4th Ulamog, because, well, Ulamog is great. And 1 copy of Ruin Processor, just to have another big body in there, maybe also useful when the opponent brings in Disdainful Stroke.
Sure.
He was planning to cut, well, depending a bit on the list, just shaving 1 ramp spell and Hedron Archive, shaving a Hangerback Walker, but leaving at least most of the Jolly offshoots, because according to him the matchup is very much in his favor and he just needs to have enough time to get to his big cards.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Looks like Omar has an active Jace looting away. We see another Jace in the graveyard, Bloodstained Mire getting a mountain. Omar has access to all 4 of his colors, rather. And there's that Mantis Rider.
This is the dream start for the Jeskai deck. When they're on the play, turn 2 Jace, turn 3 Mantis Rider. And it could have been... well, I can't really think of anything that could have gone better.
So Jake's draw for the turn looked to be a Rending Volley, but he doesn't have a mountain in his hand currently. But a turn 3 Map the Wastes.
No creature to bolster onto, though. Would have been nice if Jake would have had a turn 2 Hangerback Walker, because then you can bolster onto it and get a 2-2 Hangerback Walker. Those counters can be put to good use.
Yes, very much so. So Jake's going to have to just pass the turn here after mapping into a mountain. Omar's going to feel great about that.
Yeah, 3 mana Rampant Growth. That is where we are at in Standard right now. It's not perfect, but it does the job. And when there are so many efficient removal spells around for the alternative ramp cards like Rattleclaw Mystic, maybe the way to go.
Yeah, with so much cheap burn and cheap removal, I think playing, ramp that can't be killed by removal such as that is really nice right now. Wow, so he's going to get to Explosive Vegetation this turn and hold up Rending Volley.
And next turn, that's Ugin mana.
Yes. And in Omar's list, again, he does have 2 Disdainful Strokes and a Duress, which can be used to take out the Ugin preemptively, but he doesn't actually have a good way to counter it except for the 1 main board negate. So hopefully he has a negate or one of his 2 Disdainful Strokes, otherwise next turn's not going to be too happy for him. All right, the Rending Volley takes out the Mantis Rider.
There's no instant or sorcery in the graveyard for Jace to even flash back, so that's just ticking up. 4 mana up. Jake must be thinking of Ojitai's command here, but well, that cannot counter an Ugin. Does Jake have the Sanctum of Ugin in play? That's his land, right?
Yes.
So that card says that whenever you cast a colorless creature card with converted mana cost 7 or greater, which could also be a Hangerback Walker for Axis 4, then you get to search your library for, well, any colorless creature card. Typically Ugin, but you could also search for, say, a Hangerback Walker if the situation calls for it, or the singleton Ruin Processor that he has in his sideboard in case his life total is low and his opponent has already delved away some cards with a dig through time.
Actually, the Sanctum Ugin is just on a colorless card with 7 mana.
Oh, you can also do it whenever you cast the Ugin.
Yes, exactly.
All
so
right.
he could chain Ugin into Ulamog potentially.
Not bad.
Looks like he has a Nissa's Pilgrimage, rather, and he does have Spell Mastery. He did cast Explosive Vegetation, Map the Waste, and that Rending Volley, so he's going to get to thin his deck of 3 forests, putting one into play onto the battlefield tapped. So So we have a nice series of turns lined up for Jake Mondello here. And Omar just doesn't have the pressure that he needs.
And Jake could have cost Ugin that turn, right?
Yep, I believe he could have.
Well, he may be waiting in order to play around the disdainful stroke, like saying that, well, Omar, if you have disdainful stroke in hand, I'm not going to give you a chance to use your untapped mana right now. On the other hand, by waiting, you also give Omar more chances to draw an answer to the Ugin,
Sure.
or even a duress to take it out. Looks like there may be a problem with some of the sleeves.
Yeah, something might have got spilled on them there. It looks like it's going to go to Omar's turn. Oh. Looks like Jake, or Omar's asking Jake to count the number of cards left in his library. He might be planning on trying to get that Jace ultimate going eventually. If we could maybe switch to the second match for just a little bit while these players sort out. Looks like discrepancy in their lands. Looks like there's a card that got dropped or something like that. Okay, so they're just going to shuffle Jake's library, it looks like. It was on the ground. So it looks like there was a sleeve that might have been on the ground or something like that, and they weren't sure which deck it came from since both players are using the same sleeves here, so we're just getting that sorted out. Turns out it was from Jake's library.
An unusual judge call, but good that they figured it out.
We will stay on this match since we got that figured out.
Yeah, it's indeed that a card fell from Mondello's deck when Beldon shuffled it, and well, it's now been shuffled back in, and everything is okay again.
All right, another map the waste for Jake, who, well, is going to probably tap out for an Ugin here.
It's time.
All right, Ugin, trigger the Sanctum of Ugin. That's flavorful. Omar's like, what's this do again?
Well, it searches for Ulamog. If you count how many lands Jake has in play, I see 9 lands there. That means next turn it's Ulamog time.
Yeah, and I was talking to Mike Sigrist, who was running the same deck as Jace, and he's like, yeah, sometimes versus more controlling matchups, you just start exiling their lands and they can't do anything, and then you eventually just jam a Ugin or a Tarka, and, or a Hanger back even for that matter, and get there.
Yep. Yeah, I think Mike Sigrist was instrumental in creating this deck, so I mean, any deck that gets the stamp of approval from the current player of the year has got to be a sweet one.
Yeah, they were mentioning that they tried this deck out at the or rather in testing for the Pro Tour, but they didn't think it was good enough.
Well, now that Dark Jeskai is arguably, or in a sense, the best deck of the format, where there were 4 copies of Dark Jeskai in the top 8, when you have a deck that has a good matchup against it, as Jake claims it does, it is a good choice for the current metagame. And it's sweet to have access to such a deck in the format as well.
Yeah. And if you guys are wondering where that Jace went, Telepath Unbound, Ugin for 0 takes care of a flipped Planeswalker. Utter End from Omar is going to take out the Ugin, who now goes to his turn. This is all at the end of Jake's turn, of course. See what Omar can do here to apply some pressure to Jake, who he knows has Ulamog in hand.
But no hugely impactful permanence on the table to exile with Ulamog yet. Of course, I mean, it's a 10-10 that starts munching on your library, so if Beldon doesn't have an answer for it, it will just win the game by itself. But playing Ulamog on an empty board when Beldon could just get rid of it with a Crackling Doom may not be what you are hoping for.
I think it's a little bit notable that Omar only has 2 red sources currently, a Mountain and Mystic Monastery. So if Ulamog takes out those lands, Omar's going to be stuck on, just Esper colors.
Yeah, so the question is, does Jake play the Ulamog here? Note that Beldon also has 4 mana up, so that is Ochitai's command mana. Can counter the Ulamog.
Looks like he's certainly just tapping out for Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger here.
They might also just play Hangerback Walker for
sure,
5. Bait out some counter spell from Beldon, or maybe a first removal card. And exiling a mountain and a mystic monastery is fine here with Ulamog because it potentially reduces the amount of colors that Beldon has access to. But you could potentially get better on the next turn. Nope. Ulamog comes down. Away go the lands.
So the trigger on the stack. Looks like Omar does have that counter you were talking about, Ojutai's command. And he's going to get Jace back from his graveyard onto the battlefield. Now Omar did draw 3 cards off of Painful Truce last turn, so
yeah,
very likely he could have another land in hand. But
the thing with this match is showing the importance of Sanctum of Ugin in Mondello's deck.
yes,
That land allows Jake to increase the density of big cards in his deck, while not actually leading to too many clunky draws where you have too many of them in your opening hand, because it's a land that, taps for mana early on, and then you can cash it in to get another Ulamog. 4 copies in his list, and they look to be quite important, because just one Ulamog or one other big card like one Ugin, as you see in this match, is not going to be good enough. Opponents will have answers for them still.
All right, another Jace here.
Do I also see the All-Star Felidar Cup there in Beldon's hand? The worse than Soulfire Grandmaster, worse than Seeker of the Way, but hey, it's at least better than a Shock that does nothing.
Yes.
Great.
I think he just wanted another early drop. Obviously not good against the Jotty offshoot, but... So for
I wasn't imagining that we would be discussing the value of a grizzly bear or white grizzly bear with no relevant ability against a Jotty offshoot in the semifinals of this tournament.
Wall of Wood versus Grizzly Bears, the classic matchup.
Yep. So some more ramp from Mondello here. It's not like he really needs the additional mana, although potentially it can help by making his Hangerback Walker a bit bigger. It may be more important to thin out his deck a little bit to increase the chances of drawing another Ulamog or Ugin on the next turn.
Yeah, Jake has a lot of lands, and this is one of the problems with the deck. If you just run out of those big threats, sometimes your opponent just runs you over.
With, as it turns out, a Felidar Cup.
I think Mantis Rider is doing the more work here, but you know.
All right.
So Jace upticks.
Doesn't even cost a Felidar Cup. Such disrespect.
Ugin off the top for Jake. That's got to be one of the cards he was hoping to see. I'm not sure quite what Omar has in his hand. Looks like Disdainful Stroke is going to...
That's the perfect answer.
Yep.
Yeah, perhaps Omar can even win the game on the next turn. Mantis Rider puts Mondello down to 5. He's a Crackling Doom that can put him down to 3. Flash back to Crackling Doom. Well, I guess Omar can put Jake down to 1 life if he so desires.
Sure.
But then you might as well just hold on to the Crackling Doom for 1 more turn, just in case Mondello draws an Ulamog.
Omar is trying to craft a strategy where he can try to win through an Atarka, I would assume, or another Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. Mantis Rider getting in for 3 for Omar. Going to put Jake down to 5 life. Let's see if Jake can draw anything. We know he has a Hangerback Walker and another land in his hand. There's a Sanctum of Ugin, I believe, and with Hangerback Walker, what's that going to do, Frank?
Well, now Jake can play a Hangerback Walker. You have to play it for at least Access 4. That triggers the Sanctum of Ugin. So you can search your library for any colorless creature card. But if Jake would search for, say, Ulamog here, then he just loses to Mantis Rider plus Crackling Doom.
Sure.
In Omar's hand. Potentially can get around it by searching up the one of Ruined Processor that he boarded in. Let's see if he has another land in the hand, but
he played the Sanctum for the turn.
Yeah, so that doesn't work either. He cannot even cast that one. Yeah, I don't think Jake can actually beat the Crackling Doom. So he probably just has to play as if Omar doesn't have it and maximizes his chances against the range of cards that Omar could have that Jake can actually beat.
Yep. So we see the Hangerback Walker here. X equals 4. Sanctum of Ugin triggering.
It's a bit surprising that he doesn't just play it for more. Why not for X is 6, for instance?
Sure.
Or is he going to search for another colorless creature card that he's going to play here? No, he's not.
Well, he's looking at that Ruin Processor like you mentioned.
Yeah,
So
but he doesn't have enough mana to play it.
I think he's one off, yeah.
I'm also not sure whether Omar has any cards exiled at the moment. Has he cast Dig Through Time?
I don't
in this
believe
game?
so,
No.
but the previous Ulamog had exiled at least a
Oh,
Jace
of course,
and something
yes.
else. Or an
Yes.
Ugin exiled Jace, I believe.
That works. Okay, all these Eldrazi's do work together.
Yeah. It's a Ruin Processor for Jake.
So even though he cannot cast it on this turn, he still chooses it over Ulamog. I'm guessing because he wants to, well, gain the life.
And Hangerback Walker and Relic, Ruin Processor, rather.
Oh, he could still play a land this turn.
Oh,
Did we misread that? Okay, well,
I'm pretty sure he had played the Sanctum of Ugin on his turn.
I'm not confident.
Yeah, we're seeing. I'm going to get a judge over there just to double check, but looks like they're resolving that now.
Well, if Jake had not played a land this turn yet,
Sure.
then going for the Ruin Processor makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Yeah, so it looks like he did play the Sanctum of Ugin. He drew that for the turn. We're just double checking here. But interesting game so far. We do feel like you said Omar did for sure have a Crackling Doom in his hand.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, if Jake already played a land this turn, as we believe he has, then he's just going to lose on the next turn. He won't be able to cast the Ruin Processor, and he will lose to Mantis Rider plus Crackling Doom on the next turn. However, if we are incorrect here and Jake had not played a land this turn,
All right, so here we have an overview of the players. This is the semifinals, folks. Thanks for tuning in here at Grand Prix Quebec City. 4 players left. In the background, you can see Oliver Polak-Rotman versus Dan Lanthier. And in the foreground, we have Jake Mondello versus Omar Beldon. Jake is currently up a game, but we do believe Omar is going to take the second one from him. The players in the background there, it looks like they're shuffling up and going to a game 3 potentially.
well, even if Jake would not have played a land already this turn, which we don't believe is the case, but suppose, then that Ruin Processor will also likely not lead to victory. He is going to lose it to the Crackling Doom, then fall to 5 life after the attack, and Omar still has 2 huge threats in play, a hand filled with relevant cards. Jake is super far behind this game still. But yeah, they are getting the head judge now to sort this out.
Yeah, a lot of interesting decks here in the top 8. Of course, for Dark Jeskai, not exactly the most representative, I guess, of the format, but we'll have to see what the other players are going to do here. If we can go to the secondary match, it looks like they're about to play for a bit while we sort out our main feature match.
It also looks like we got confirmation from Matt Mendoza from the floor that Jake acknowledged that he has played 2 lands this turn. It might still be an honest mistake where you think you can still play a land and then it's pointed out and you go through the entire motion of the turns and realize you have played a second land. But we will let the judges resolve that situation.
We'll let you guys know what happens as soon as the judge figures that out. Here we have the Dark Jeskai mirror. There are a few card differences, subtle differences between each player's deck, but for the most part, I would say the same 70, same 65 out of 75.
Pretty much. Both are based on the basis that Owen Turtenwald and John Finkel put forward at the Pro Tour last weekend. Yeah, this game can take a while. These matches can be quite grindy. After sideboard, the players gain access to another copy of Dragon Master Outcast, the second one. That could be useful, especially with all of these commands, bringing it back time after time. Possibly some copies of Duress to, well, take out those commands before they provide some value. And what else might they be boarding in? Possibly Exert Influence if they want to go with some funky plays of taking over Tessiger from the other side, for instance. But overall, it will remain a matchup where Jace, Rinse Prodigy is huge. You need to have an answer for it, and you have all of these 2-for-1s with the commands.
Yeah. Looks like we're actually only on game 2. I was mistaken. I thought we were on a game 3, but Oliver up a game over Dan, who resolved the turn 2 Jace, and it's active and not dead yet, so that's got to be a good sign for Dan, who was on the play.
No third land for Oliver either. Dragon Master Outcast. It's nice on turn 10, but on turn 2, when you're looking for an answer to Jace, it's just the worst card you can have. It cannot even attack into the Jace.
Yeah. I think something important to note is that with the polluted, the polluted Delta, Oliver opted to get a swamp, which means he cannot cast that Mantis Rider on curve. Well, if he draws, another land, since one of his lands is a swamp. So that might signify like
unusual.
Doom. Yeah.
Yeah, but even then he could have gone for
Sunken Hollow.
Sunken Hollow or Smoldering Marsh.
Sure.
Both of which would allow him to get to the correct mana for both Mantis Rider and Crackling Doom on 3 lands.
Yeah. For Dan, it looks like he's missing a red source until what land do we have here? All right, a Bloodstained Mire is going to find Dan his red source. Jace potentially flipping next turn if Dan so chooses to loot.
And Dan easily in the lead. Here his hand seems stacked. I saw a Dig Through Time that can get him some more action. A bunch of other spells. Yeah, he's playing against an opponent who is missing land drops.
Yep. And that's one of the bigger issues with the Dark Jeskai deck. Its mana base is kind of spread out, and while the fixing is very, very good, if you even stumble just a little bit, it can be hard to come back. So it looks like Dig Through Time is going to be the play for Dan. So this means his Jace is going to stay a creature for a little bit longer.
Not all that much longer. I mean, the Dig Through Time is the second card into the graveyard. Maybe next turn there is a removal spell from Dan, plus a fetch land, and then bam, Jace becomes a Planeswalker after all.
And I gotta imagine it's a good thing when Jace flips in this matchup. It's a lot harder to deal with a Planeswalker than an O2 creature. Looks like our main match is back and underway. We are going to go to a game 3. Omar taking the second game over Jake. Players are shuffling up. So we'll stay here until the players resolve their mulligans and whatnot. Keep you guys in the action, but we will be going back to the red-green ramp versus the Dark Jeskai.
At least Oliver found a third land, so we may be getting a game.
Sure.
Still, that Swamp is laughing in the face of Mantis Rider. And Dan does not have a big clock yet. I think he has a bunch of reactive cards in hand. Cards like Negate, Crackling Doom, Call Against Command, Dig Through Time. But no creature to start punishing Oliver for his mana stumble. And now Oliver finds the fourth land.
I believe that's a Prairie Stream, though, and he only has one basic land right now, so it's going to come and enter the battlefield tapped.
It's a Flooded Strand, so that can fetch
I'm sorry.
an untapped plains or an untapped island.
His cards are a little bit different since they're foreign, so it looked like the extended text was Prairie Stream as opposed to Flooded Strand. I guess I could have told by the art, though.
Note that Oliver, although he has Mantis Rider in hand, does not cast it here, because he's afraid of Ojitai's command. If in this matchup you just walk straight into an Ojitai's command, Well, you just give your opponent the perfect opportunity to leverage their cards.
Yeah. It also looks like Oliver wanted to respond to
Yes.
Dan's activation of Jace. So
I imagine we'll be seeing a removal spell for the Jace here. And yeah, the timing is interesting. By responding to the loot activation, Oliver gives Dan one fewer draw step, or like card draw, to find a dispel or other answer to it. But at the same time, if Dan has the dispel here, then he can actually cast a dispel, and while the Jace loot trigger is still on the stack, fetch a land with Flutterstrand and flip Jace right away. Why he would want to do that actually, I don't know, because it's probably just better to keep Jace around for your own turn for another loot.
sure.
There doesn't really seem to be an advantage to flipping it at the end of Oliver's turn. So yeah, this timing seems good here.
Yeah. And Oliver actually has a dispel in his hand too. So if they get into some kind of counter war, Oliver can potentially win that battle. All right, looks like that Kolaghan's command is going to resolve. Dan opts to discard Crackling Doom. Since
Yeah, and Dan also didn't want to fight with his negate. Perhaps correctly identifying that Oliver has a dispel in hand. And, well, Dan knew that Oliver was missing land drops and might not want to give Oliver a good chance for playing the dispel. No, he just wants to protect his own Kolaghan's command, it looks like.
Sure.
That makes sense as well.
Dan does have the option to pop off the negate here if he wants to. He also has a dig through time in his hand, which he could use instead. It looks like he might be going with that play.
All right.
Flooded Strand hitting the bin.
Yeah, Dan is holding on to his negates. I might have been a bit too over-eager to use that card. Just, hey, here's a spell, negated. And, well, to be fair, like you protect a 2-for-1, which is always nice. But perhaps Dan is saving it for something like a dig through time for Oliver, or some other bigger impact card.
Yeah, this matchup is all about the 2-for-1s. You were mentioning it earlier, but people are just trading back and forth, until finally somebody can, exert their a little bit of a lead into an overwhelming one. All right. We're wondering how the first match is going still. Looks like still shuffling up, though. I know you guys are waiting to see some more match between the Eldrazi deck and the other Dark Jeskai.
You have to get those Eldrazi's well shuffled.
Yes. A lot of deep play here between the Dark Jeskai mirrors, though. And we made a game of it, even though Oliver had missed his third land drop for what was it, a turn 2?
Yes.
Yeah. Painful truce now.
Well, you cannot cast it without a black mana.
Right. So
this'll work.
yeah, white, blue, black, presumably. And a net of 3 cards, lose 3 life.
All the value. Yeah, now a duress. If Dan also has a black source. Looks like he has a Bloodstained Mire. So that may allow him to give. So that may give him a peek at Oliver's hand, so he knows what Oliver has to work with.
And in this kind of matchup, it's so important to, well, not only get your 2-for-1s, but if you can get those duresses, just any kind of knowledge off of your opponent, it swings it in your favor by so much. And there we in fact see the duress. Oliver, of course, tapped out, reveals, looks like 2 Crackling Dooms, Mantis Rider, Exert Influence, and a Kolaghan's Command. All scary cards.
You just look at the cards on the table and you realize that this is one of the grindiest matchups that we've seen in a long time in Standard. So what does Dan even want to take here? Well, the Crackling Dooms so far don't really matter too much. Dan doesn't even have a creature on the table. Exert Influence and Colligan's Command are both 2-for-1s in a way. Colligan's Command can, for instance, get back the Dragon Master outcast if Dan kills it at a later point in the game, and then also deal 2 damage to, well, a Jace, maybe some turns from now. Exert Influence can gain control of, for instance, a Jace or a Tessiger or something like that. He goes for the Exert Influence, more scared of that 2-for-1.
Yeah.
Perhaps also because he has a Dispel to counter the Colligan's Command, but Dispel cannot counter Exert Influence, so that may be influencing his decision as well.
We're going to let these players finish up this game 2. Looks like Oliver's currently in the lead. Let's go back to our main feature match between Jake Mondello and Omar Beldon. You can already see, looks like turn 3 Map the Wastes for Jake, getting a Mountain who has double Shrine. That can be scary.
Oh yeah. Well, it's only turned on when you get to 7 lands. But I think Jake also has Explosive Vegetation in hand. So that might lead to a turn 4 Explosive Vegetation and turn 5 Ulamog.
I also see a Sanctum of
It's not
Ugin
bad.
in Jake's hand, so he's going to be able to cast Ugin, trigger the Sanctum, get Ulamog.
Oh yeah.
That should be nice. But Omar has a very good start on his side, too. Remember, this is game 3 between these players in the semifinals here at Grand Prix Quebec City.
Yeah, it is the dream start because Omar is the beatdown in this matchup. Although in the previous game he was able to win in the long game by drawing the right mix of answers, like Disdainful Stroke and Other End. Typically, the Jeska deck just cannot keep up with all the Ulamog action, so the Jeska deck has to try to win fast. And well, a Soulfire Grandmaster followed by a Mantis Rider certainly does that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I saw a Rending Volley in Jake's hand, too. So that's one of that's going to be a very, very important card here. It's going to save him a bunch of life off of that Mantis Rider.
I also see a Juddy offshoot.
I think it's a little bit too slow right now.
The fan favorite. Well, I mean, it can block the Soulfire Grandmaster and then gain him some points of life after playing some lands.
Yeah. And even though Jake only has 7 lands on the battlefield right now, he has access to what? 2, 4, 5, 9 mana.
Yep, that is what the deck does. Yeah, it's really based on getting all the lands in play and abusing these Sanctum of Ugins, Shrine of the Forgotten Gods. So that's also why there is Sylvan Scrying, which doesn't actively ramp you over Radiclaw Mystic, but hey, if Sylvan Scrying gets the Shrine, well, it's effectively kind of a ramp spell.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to imagine we're going to see the Ugin here from Jake, probably getting one of his Ulamogs. And, you know, if he's able to cast Ulamog next turn, the Ceaseless Hunger, of course, Omar only on 4 lands currently. That's huge.
Yeah, what Mondello may have to be scared of is, well, counter magic from Beldon.
Sure.
Notably Disdainful Stroke, which came in from the sideboard, as well as Ojitai's Command. Do you think he's gonna bait out the Ojitai's Command with the Jadi offshoot?
I don't think Omar wants to counter a Jadi offshoot, but it is stopping the Soulfire Grandmaster if that is the case.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Omar can still win this game through Ugin and Ulamog if he has, you know, a counter for the Ugin and a counter for the Ulamog. Let's see what happens here. All right, so Ugin, trigger, Sanctum.
Yes, it triggers off of any colorless spell, not just creatures.
7 or greater.
Yep.
All right, so a stroke on the Ugin is going to have that countered. Ulamog instantly searched up by Jake.
Couldn't get that out of the deck faster. Now Jake doesn't have 10 lands yet, or 10 mana yet, right?
He's at 9.
Yeah, he needs another land for the next turn, which he does not have at the moment.
Not quite, no.
But I mean, his deck is filled with mana, so
Correct.
even if he doesn't draw a land, it's likely that he finds a Map the Waste or Explosive Vegetation or anything of the sort.
And you have to imagine Omar's going to leave up some sort of counter if he has one this turn. Rending Volley's going to eat Soulfire Grandmaster, and we'll just see what Omar wants to do here.
It's interesting that Jake chose not to cast the Jedi offshoot.
Yeah.
Because that could have dealt with the Soulfire Grandmaster as a blocker as well. Then maybe he could have saved his Rending Volley for a Mantis Rider or a Jace.
Sure.
perhaps he didn't want to reveal his hand, because if Jake plays the Juddy offshoot, then he basically tells Omar, I don't have
Yes.
a 10th mana for the Ulamog yet. That's maybe too much information to give.
Although top deck Ugin from Jake Mondello is going to resolve, it looks like.
Right, it's not a land, but an Ugin also works.
Not a
It's-
bad draw.
It's great to be in this situation because pretty much every card in your deck is good. If it's a land, well, you can play the Ulamog. If it is a ram spell, well, Ulamog will come down on the next turn. If it is a big spell like Ugin, well, that's fine too. If it is a Juddy offshoot, well, maybe not so much.
I'm a little surprised that Omar didn't crack his fetch in response and use the dig through time to find, you know, another disdainful stroke or potentially a negate for that Ugin.
Good point.
Wonder if that was intended or if he has a different sort of game plan here. Okay, so it looks like he's going to leave the Soulfire Grandmaster in his graveyard instead. Interesting. Okay.
Well, there is some merit to doing it that way because it makes future Ojedice commands a bit
Sure.
better. Because now you have a creature of 2 mana in your graveyard that you can get back. But I would have to imagine indeed that exiling 2 more cards to at least get the option of finding a disdainful stroke
Yeah.
or negate is just more important at this point.
We'll have to see what Omar can find, though. If he does have a, like, say, Utter End in hand, maybe that's why he opted to do this instead. But he does know Jake still has Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger in his hand as well, and he only needs 1 more land for that to go off. Omar draws for the turn. Looks like a mountain there.
I also think that Omar indeed already has the other end in hand.
Okay.
So he has an answer for the Ugin already. He doesn't really care whether Ugin ticked up and shot himself for 3 damage.
All right, a Haven of the Spirit Dragon. Wow, the draw for Jake.
That's sweet because it's both a land for the Ulamog and there is an Ugin in his graveyard which got countered by the Disdainful Stroke earlier. So now Haven of the Spirit Dragon can start bringing that one back.
Exactly.
Perhaps even the perfect card in the deck for Jake to draw at this point.
So Jake's going to cast Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger here. His only targets of Omar's are currently lands. Now Omar is going to be able to counter the Ulamog, but not before 2 lands go away. He can get the Soulfire Grandmaster back onto the battlefield and then cast Utter End to exile the Ugin before it ultimates.
So can Jake deny a complete color of mana on Omar's side?
Not with...
There are more than 2 red lands. There are more than 2 blue lands, more than 2 white lands, and yeah, more than 2 black lands as well. So whatever Jake chooses, he cannot like completely invalidate 1 full color of mana.
Yeah. And that's why I think Omar just passed the turn without doing anything to Ugin, because he knows Jake doesn't have any interaction for a card like Utter End here. And in fact, there it is. But like you mentioned before, Jake already has 1 extra Ugin in the graveyard from a counter earlier.
I'm not sure Omar has an answer to that one. Oh, I think we're gonna see the dream.
The combo.
The 1/4 Jedi offshoot. Bolster doing work.
And you know what? He's even going to get a life here.
Yep. Does it all.
It does it all. All right, we still have a game yet. We'll see if Omar can find himself an answer to the threat of Ugin looming. And, you know, Jake can still draw more Ulamogs.
Of course, there's 2 more copies remaining in his deck.
Minimum,
well,
right? Yeah.
As well as 2 Dragonlord Atarka as well. Well, Dragon Master Outcast could be good if it weren't for the Ulamog that is coming down on the next turn. I think Omar has Painful Truths and maybe another Ojedice command in hand.
Okay.
But that is not going to help against Ugin. Not yet, at least.
Another Jodi offshoot, the draw for Jake, but he did return that Ugin at the end of turn. Let's see if Omar has a counter for that. Looks like it's going to resolve.
Well, the interesting play for Jake now is, okay, do you plus Ugin? Well, you certainly want to get rid of the Dragon Master
Yes.
outcast, because that's a big threat on the table. But do you plus it in order to just kill it with damage? Or do you minus it? The benefit of plussing is obviously that, well, you plus a Planeswalker.
Sure.
But it would be really dangerous against the Ojitai's command, because if Jake had done that, Omar could recur it with Ojitai's command, get it back in play, get a dragon in his upkeep, and maybe somehow get his way out of this game. So I like the decision by Jake there to minus the Ugin rather than to plus it.
Yeah, great point. Omar using Ojitai's command to counter that last card, Jodi Offshoot, on Jake's side of the board and drawing a card as well. Let's see if he can find something here. Kolagon's command. Okay.
Ooh, and that'll do it.
Yeah, so that's going to be real nice. It's going to deal 2 damage to Ugin and get back Mantis Rider from the graveyard, which he can instantly cast. And just like that, things have swung back to Omar's control.
All right, so maybe Jake should have plussed his Ugin after all.
Yeah.
I guess then he could have minused it on the next turn to take out the Dragon Master outcast and the dragon at that point.
Another Mantis Rider off the top for Omar is going to put Jake on a 1-turn clock.
Is there an Ulamog? Jake was really happy with the matchup going into this match, but as we saw, Omar does have plenty of ways, especially after sideboard, to deal with the big threats, ranging from Disdainful Stroke to other end. And when Omar can follow that up with a bunch of Mantis Riders, at a certain point, the stream of big colorless cards is over.
Yeah, and that's going to be it. Jake extends the hand. Omar Beldon takes the match, 2-1 over Jake Mondello. So we're going to see at least one Dark Jeskai in the finals. Looks like our other...
At least 2.
Oh, sorry, at least 2, because we do have that other feature match going on in the background you guys can see there. Let's switch over to that game. It's a game 3 between Oliver Pollock-Rothman and Dan Lanthier.
So this will already be kind of a preview of the finals, which will feature a Dark Jeskai mirror. It has been called the best deck in Standard by many, and I think this GP, the results here, especially in the top 8, confirm that.
Absolutely. Now, we saw a little bit of innovation between all of the Dark Jeskai lists, but pretty much running a steady supply of the same cards. Dress from Oliver. Gonna see what Dan has.
It's 2 copies of Crackling Doom, an Exert Influence, Dispel, Painful Truths, and Prairie Stream. Well, so far, Dan looks to be ahead in this game because, well, he has the Soul Threat on the table in the form of Tessiger. The card that was discarded is Dispel, which means that Crackling Doom from Oliver is going to resolve, take out the Tessiger, and now, well, the board is back to parity. Oliver knows that Dan has plenty of answers for the first couple of threats that he would put out in the form of double Crackling Doom and Exert Influence. Now Dan can also draw a bunch of cards with Painful Truths, trying to find, well, a win condition.
Sure.
He actually drew Mantis Rider for his turn, and he might be interested in casting that one rather than the Painful Truths, going for the standard sequencing of play out your threats first, and then when you don't have anything else to do, play a card draw spell in order to find more action.
And that's exactly what he does. Dan plays the Mantis Rider he just drew, like you had mentioned, and drops Oliver to 16 on the attack. Oliver draws for the turn. Happens to be a Dig Through Time. I hear Dig Through Time's a pretty good card.
Yep, one of the key pieces of this Jeskai deck, digging it out of any hole it finds itself in.
Yeah, surprisingly, only 2 copies of Dig Through Time in each of these lists, but like we've mentioned earlier, it's a little bit awkward when you get multiple Dig Through Times in your hands. So.
Yeah, there are also a bunch of Tessigers in the deck.
Sure.
Your graveyard is a finite resource, so you can only play so many Delve cards. 5 Delve cards has been kind of the consensus that most players have agreed on, even in mana bases with lots of fetch lands.
That's a great point, yep. And we see Oliver pop off that Flooded Strand. Getting a Prairie Stream, I think. Let's see what he opts to do here. He does know Dan's complete hand because Dan drew the Mantis Rider that previous turn.
Indeed. So to recap, what Oliver knows is 1 Exert Influence, 2 Crackling Doom, and 1 Painful Truth. So the way that Oliver can approach this game is, well, certainly don't give a good target for Exert Influence for no reason. First, find a good answer to the Mantis Rider. Then, well, if he can have a counter for the Painful Truth in the form of a negate or something, that would be perfect as well. But it's likely that Dan will draw a bunch of additional cards. And maybe Oliver has to try to get ahead via Ojitai's command, the dismiss mode, and then more dig through times. Eventually setting up a reasonable hand where perhaps he can start playing some Colligan's commands, returning some creatures from his own graveyard to his hand, forcing Dan to discard some of his removal spells, and then one way or another, slowly but steadily, wade his way through victory.
Yeah, these matchups are super grindy. It's a lot of mental fortitude needed to not only just plan out what you're going to do, but
yeah, if it weren't for that Exert Influence in Dan's hand, you could just take a bunch of creatures, start casting those. Sure, they trade 1 for 1 against the Crackling Doom, but that's fine. But now if Oliver just adds, for instance, a Mantis Rider or a Tessiger to the board, it's just going to get stolen by Dan, and then you fall way too far behind. Giving Dan a Jace, well, that is acceptable because Oliver has Colligan's command in hand.
Sure.
So if Dan would decide to cast Exert Influence on Jace, you have a good way to get around that.
Well,
but I doubt that Dan is interested in doing that, especially given that he drew a Fiery Impulse.
Sure. Also, Exert Influence on a Planeswalker is not exactly where you want to be, or rather,
yeah, that's a good point too,
Yeah.
because if Jace transforms, it actually goes
back to Oliver's side.
Yeah, exactly. The Planeswalker always goes to the owner, so that's a relevant interaction to keep in mind for sure.
Dan opting to instead use a Crackling Doom here and get in for 3. Yeah, this Mantis Rider is on a 3-turn clock right now. Let's see if Oliver can find a way to deal with it. Another Jace off the top might not be what he wanted to look for. He knows Dan has that Exert Influence, so he can't play his own Mantis Rider if he happened to draw it, or not very well anyways.
Is a Crackling Doom more appealing than Fiery Impulse plus Painful Truth? Might have liked to draw 3 cards if I were in Dan's position.
Sure, yeah. Oliver only representing a Dispel in that last instance. Right, so it looks like Kolaghan's command is going to be targeting the Mantis Rider and Dan for a discard. Dan lets us resolve this card's Crackling Doom. Second Kolaghan's command doing the same exact thing here. And Dan can do nothing but shrug, so a 2 for 3 in essence.
Works.
Yeah.
So Dan discarding the Fiery Impulse means that Oliver knows that the 2 remaining cards in Dan's hand are Exert Influence and Painful Truths. Yeah, if Dan had just cast the Painful Truths in the previous turn, he might have also been able to draw some lands, which he could have tossed to those Kolaghan's commands.
Sure.
Now he lost relevant cards.
So now we do see the Painful Truths. X is going to be 3. That's going to put Dan to 12 life. Other end.
2 lands.
And 2 lands the draw. We saw Oliver draw that Jace Vryn's Prodigy last turn, so we might expect that to be the play for him next turn, depending on what else.
Yeah, Dan has an answer to it in the form of, well, other ends potentially. Exert Influence, as we learned, not the best answer.
Painful Truths, of course, already resolved. They're just, Dan deciding what he wants to do for this turn. Plays a land and looks like he's passing. All right, a Mantis Rider for Oliver now is a pretty nice one.
Yeah, 2 of these cards are just so awkward against the Exert Influence.
Yes.
The Jace is great, but I think you just have to pass. And you could play both Mantis Rider and Tessiger on this turn, but then you just turn on the Exert Influence. Maybe Oliver also wants to wait until way later in the game when he can cast Tessiger with like 8 mana up.
Okay.
Then even if Dan gains control of it via Exert Influence, you get 2 activations in response, get some value there, and potentially an answer to, well, effectively your own Tessiger.
Sure, that makes sense.
Or maybe if Dan plays a Tessiger of his own, well, that also gives you an opening to cast your own Tessiger, because then the Exert Influence doesn't turn into a 2-for-1 due to the legendary rule.
Excellent point. I see Dan shuffling around his hand here. Looks like Utter End might be the option for him, although not quite sure what else is in the hand.
It's Utter End,
Mystic
Exert
Monastery.
Influence, a bunch of lands.
Okay.
Possibly a Colligan's Command?
Yeah, that would be a decent play here. 4 mana now.
Yeah, you have to get rid of the Jace at some point, so might as well do it now before you give Oliver any chances of, well, improving his card quality from the draw step.
Sure. Now, what's the benefit of doing it on his main phase as opposed to Oliver's upkeep?
Well, as we learned, as one unfortunate player learned over the course of this event, if Dan had waited, then Jace would just draw a card in response, turn into a Planeswalker, and then the other end is countered because the Jace is now a different card entirely.
Exactly. I was hoping you'd point out that interaction. All right. Oliver fetching Prairie Stream here with that polluted Delta.
Yeah, thinning out the deck even more. Yeah, with all these fetch lands in, like, typically the deck thinning value of fetch lands is a bit overrated. It only influences your draws by like a couple percent.
Mm-hmm.
But in a very long, grindy matchup like this one, those advantages can add up when the game takes 10, 20, maybe 30 turns. Just having a couple additional draw steps where you draw a business spell instead of just another land can really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dan, end of turn, used Kolagon's command to bring back his Mantis Rider and make Oliver discard a card. Oliver opting to discard one of the Mantis Riders in his hand. We know the last card being a Tasigur, but that Exert Influence is showing its power. And Oliver falling to 5 here.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by that card in this matchup for sure. The games are just so grindy that you have to go for every 2-for-1 you can get.
Yeah.
And even though Dan may not even end up casting the card in this game, just the knowledge that Dan has it in hand, which Oliver gained via Duress, has been so instrumental in shaping the events of this game. I mean, if it weren't for that card, Oliver would have cast his Tessiger already turns ago.
Yes.
But
and
now, yeah, he just feels like he has to pull the trigger. He doesn't have many other good options, so he just casts it. Looks like it will resolve. Immediately goes for the activation. No point in waiting. Hoping to get perhaps a Duress against the Exert Influence.
Yeah, that would be great.
Something to that extent.
It's a Kolagon's command and Dispel, though. Not the most amazing of cards. He was looking for an answer for Mantis Rider, I believe.
Dan gives him the Kolagon's command, which doesn't do much at this point indeed, but neither would the Dispel. Well, except Dan has a Kolagon's command. So now you can attack for lethal, and Oliver doesn't have a Dispel to counter the final 2 damage.
And Mantis Rider puts Oliver down to 2 life. Dan's going to cast Exert Influence first, see if the path is clear. Oliver taps his deck.
Play around negate, perhaps.
Land off the top for Oliver. Not exactly what he's looking for. And he's going to extend the hand, so Dan Lanthier is going to take the match 2-1 over Oliver Polak-Rotman. We are going to see a finals between Dan and Omar in